Hi everyone, welcome to the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival. My name is Margherita Ghetti and I am the Next Wave programmer here at JFI. It's my pleasure to be here with all of you tuning in from the US and to get a chance to spend time with our guests for this program, the filmmaker and a cast and a crew member of the amazing feature film Sin La Habana. I want to thank also our ASL interpreter, Tisha Riley, for helping us make this program more widely accessible. So hello, everyone. Hi. I want to start by asking you guys to maybe go ahead and introduce yourself for our audience. So whoever wants to start can go first.
My name is Kaveh Nabadian. I'm the writer, director, and composer of the film.
Hi, Kaveh.
Hi.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm Gabrielle Tuga-Prechet. I'm one of the producer of the film.
I am Barry, and I am one of the actors for a few minutes in the film.
Nice to meet you guys. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for making this film. I rewatched yesterday to prepare for today and remembered how mesmerizing it felt to watch this film, Sin La Habana, for the first time back when we decided to book the film for the festival. And I have a feeling it's a common viewing experience. Certainly it was for all of us at JFI. So a big thank you for telling this powerful story in such beautiful images. So I want to make sure everyone here gets a chance to tell us about aspects of the film so we can hopefully cover a variety of questions that came up for people as they watch. And I'm gonna go ahead and ask a first question to the filmmaker, Kaveh. So I'd like to ask you how you got in touch with this story. What was the inspiration of the story? And also I was curious to know if you have any particular ties to Cuba. How does Cuba fit in your life or your artistic interest?
Well, I started spending a lot of time in Cuba in the early 2000s, partly I think because it became such a popular place in the worldwide cultural landscape. With this the Buena Vista Social Club record, and then there's the film, and so I think I was kind of like drawn into that same tourist idea of this like communist tropical utopia with this magical people playing music on the streets everywhere. And as a musician, I wanted to experience that. And then when I got there, I mean, there definitely is all of that there, but it's also a very complicated place. It isn't just, by any means, a tropical utopia. So, and one of the things that I found most interesting was the relationship between foreigners and Cubans. I've traveled around the world a lot, and I've seen how expats and tourists and locals, the kind of relationships they tend to have, there's always, relationships of power and privilege and socioeconomic difference. But in Cuba, it's particular because people are so educated and people have, they can speak your language, they can get right in there with you. And so you start to think that as a tourist, you're making these friends, but there's also a transactional nature to it. So that was interesting right away. And then I was also seeing how there's this transactional kind of relationship that happens with this idea of the Cuban man or woman as this, beautiful, seductive person. And so you'd see a lot of sex tourism, both from foreign men and foreign women. And that's really easy to kind of discount as, just a very basic kind of sort of, they call it kineterismo in Cuba, but it's, kind of prostitution. But actually, each one of those people has a story. There's a reason why that foreign person came to Cuba to try to find that kind of thing that was missing in their life. And there's a reason why that Cuban person is either trying to get money or trying to leave. And sometimes those reasons are very basic, but sometimes they're really complex and really interesting. And so I started to get interested in the different stories. And with my co-writer, Pablo Herrera, we started to look at the kinds of people who are trying to leave. Pablo himself is quite a famous musician who left himself. So he had a whole side of the story. And so we kind of took it from there, and we got into the world of ballet because Cuban ballet dancers operate at such a high level, and they're so needed in other places. And in fact, it's easier for a lot of, especially Afro-Cuban dancers, to do really well outside of Cuba rather than in Cuba. So that was kind of the impetus. That was kind of like where we set the groundwork for the whole story to start up from.
Thank you. That's really well said, and it explains a lot about the film. And as you're speaking now, and obviously watching the film, I'm also struck by the amazing intersection of different cultures and cultural levels that you show, right? Even in the one of the protagonists, Leonardo, he's very sensitive to traditions and traditional medicine and ritual, but then he adapts to Canadian culture, starts wearing glasses. So what is, and obviously, you know, this film lends itself to a lot of interpretations, and I know it could be presented at a festival about Latin American cinema, and now we're presenting it at a Jewish film festival, right? So how was it to get in touch with all these different cultural levels for you, and how did you pick what to put in there?
Well, that's something that's just really interesting to me, is the way different cultures intersect. And actually, when I was writing it, some people were suggesting that it should be a white woman who comes to Cuba rather than a Persian woman, especially a Persian Jew, who are not well known, you know, outside of, other than by, you know, Iranians and people who know that Iranian Jews even exist. But I mean, the reality is, again, like, why should it be like the white person as the cultural norm? And it's like the white, like the norm versus the other. I thought it was much more interesting to take two people, and you see that all the time in a multicultural place like Montreal or New York. You know, a Cuban woman with a black guy from America, or with an Asian person. You know, and so then it's not just like the standard versus the exotic, but it's like two people who are from totally different worlds meeting in this place where neither of them feel quite at home. And that's a very real thing, especially in these kind of multicultural cities, is that neither person is using their own language even with each other. And so there's this constant negotiation and adaptation, and you see that all the time. And then that breeds a new culture in places like New York City or Montreal or Rome or whatever, you know, like, and I think that's a really interesting thing that happens. And so I was interested in showing those, I was interested in showing across, like, the intersection of different cultures. And actually something that was pointed out to me recently that I wasn't even aware of was that there's no speaking roles for any white people in the movie, which wasn't even done on purpose, you know, but it was like kind of, but I thought that was an interesting thing that just kind of happened because we were looking at how different cultures interact. And it wasn't to say like white culture isn't interesting, but there's enough movies about white people. So it was kind of interesting to show these kind of worlds colliding, I guess.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you. And that, I think that's a really powerful message, because as you said, it applies really well to different places in the world, among which the US, in which, you know, if one could think at that level of we're all coming from different places, so we're all different the same way, the world would be a different place. And I'm reminded of the really powerful scene in the kitchen when the family is celebrating, I think a newborn baby, and the father has a really openly kind of racist moment, and he's reminded, we are Iranian Jews. We're not different than a guy who's come from Cuba. So it shows really well in the film. Okay, I have more questions, so let's move on. Gabrielle, I have some questions for you, and of course, I'm assuming, assuming you and Kaveh worked closely with each other. So if you guys want to complete each other's sentences, you can. I was curious to know if, as a producer, you can tell us a bit about maybe the actors, how you got in touch with these actors. I was reading that some of them have really unique stories that are not actors in the first place in terms of their career? And also, maybe a second question is, what were the challenges of shooting a film that has two such distinct locations and feelings to the film, and I'm assuming to the conditions of the production of the film?
Yes, sure. Yeah, about the casting. The casting was really thrilling and stressful at the same time, I must say. Kaveh will tell you the same. Uh, we first, Kaveh got his idea about Yona Acosta, the main actor, the ballet dancer, because it was the most important purpose that, yeah, you can play, but you have to dance as well as a real professional and really good one. So but with his schedule, because Yona work in Germany right now, so the schedule with all the shows and the shooting, so yeah, sometimes it was a bit stressful, but we make this happen. And then we traveled to Cuba for location and casting, and we actually Kaveh meet Evelyn, the one who interpret Sarah, a few months before we start the shoot, and she was just the perfect. Like there were no question at all. And I had the pleasure to work with her on another production that we shot in Cuba as well, another film, so for a small role. So I was really happy to join her again on that one. And yeah, for the other main actress, Nasim, the Iranian actress, it was not easy at all. It was in Montreal, and we saw a lot of amazing actresses, but this one was the perfect fit for the film.
Were you looking for an Iranian Jew, or were you looking for someone, as Kaveh was saying, that would be just from a location other than the US, or a non-white person?
We were looking for Iranian for sure, also because of the language, because they speak in Persian in the film. So yeah, it was no question of a white person playing an Iranian for sure.
Okay.
And there's a lot of good actress from Iran in Montreal, so we've been kind of lucky on that. And yeah, it was a triple casting, right? Like Germany, Cuba, and Montreal.
Wow.
But it was fun, and it was a pleasure too to made a casting, because there's a scene with all the Iranian family, right? So we take all those actors from Montreal and friends of friends to make a full community.
Right.
And what was the second part?
I was wondering what it was like to shoot in Havana and Montreal. I'm assuming it kind of at the same span of time. Anything interesting or challenging that came up from that?
Yeah, the challenge was to make the transition between those two, because we didn't have I think we got like 36 hours between the shoot in Cuba and the shoot in Montreal. And it was in January month, which is not the same weather at all. So the main difference was that, like, I will always remember, like, bringing the actors from Cuba in one of the biggest and the coldest storm I ever saw in Montreal. It was just the destiny. They arrived and it was like minus 30, something like that. But I'll really enjoyed the shooting in Cuba and in Montreal for those both mix of culture. Because, like, I think people are a bit different in Montreal during winter time. It's another beat. It's another way of living. And in Cuba, it's not always the same, but it's always like super colorful and energetic. And so we had those two different tempo to follow.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I feel like in the film that's expressed really well. There's a lot of there's a lot of sensations, like we feel a lot with the characters, what they're going through, and I think that first cut to Leonardo walking around with a huge jacket in the snow, we really feel how cold he is. And as Sara says, even his skin feels colder. So I
Yeah.
can imagine there was a similar experience that you had, and shows up on screen too. Thank you, Gabrielle. Okay, Barry, now some questions for you.
Sure.
Tell us a bit about your role. I'm curious to know how and if Kaveh had to convince you to play a role in the film, if you have acting prior acting skills, and how was it for you to play that character? And if you can remind us about him too.
Sure. First of all, it was an honor for me to be invited to participate in this. I am not an actor, but my business, I go to a lot of court hearing and I have to present things. So it was not, I was somewhat familiar with being on TV because I am also often quoted, I'm interviewed by television people about economics of art. Anyway, to me, it is a familiar story of love, betrayal, uh, not getting along with culture, being introduced to a new culture, things that are really familiar, but to his great talent, Kaveh put many different aspects to this and brought the familiar themes that we humans have, conflicts, aspirations, desires, into at least 3 different cultures. I think there's really more than 3. I firstly, of course, I love to dance and I love the dancer a great deal, but I also love the rituals, the uh, chicken at the beginning and all the other rituals, and how all of these different conflicts, different desires, different human characters came together in the context of a minimum of 3 more or less incompatible cultures. And at the end, people got, everybody got some of what they were looking for. Nobody was totally happy or unhappy, which is great. I mean, I was so happy that it was not a happy Hollywood type of movie. It was something that was really very serious. It really dealt into the characteristics of people, into their heart and to their mind from their different backgrounds, and the backgrounds are really conflicting. And of course, the story of women not being very well treated from often third world countries, although uh, we see that elsewhere as well, to come into a culture that suddenly offers them a lot of freedom, some of which is really superficial, but suddenly people can go nuts, they can go crazy because the freedom that appears to them is not real, because there are always conflicts, responsibilities, and it's not that easy to delve into a culture and quickly become part of it. I've been in North America for more than 45 years. I still learn about things that I should have learned
Of
a long
course.
time ago. It's not that easy to delve into a culture and be part of it. And I think that Kaveh did a great job of making it familiar to everybody. I doubt that anybody who thinks about this would not identify with some aspect of the film.
True. Yeah, thank you for explaining so well, and it feels like acting in the film really brought you close to its themes and messages. Um, so I don't know if Kaveh or Gabrielle or Barry, you wanna add anything? I have maybe one last question, but I also wanna leave you room, maybe if there's anything that we didn't touch on that you think could be meaningful for our audience, something peculiar about making the film, or I'll have a question for you if not.
Well, I think one thing that my dad touched on that was important to me and that is interesting, I think, in the context of a Jewish film festival is that, you know, the 2 main protagonists come from very different religions. And I was trying to portray them each as equally kind of exotic and banal, I guess. And I think that's what is the truth of a lot of religions, is that it just becomes something you do, but if seen from the outside, it can seem kind of crazy, you know? So, you know, with Santeria, which is the Afro-Cuban religion, which I was initiated into myself a long time ago, you know, there's sacrifices and there's all these things that can seem very almost scary to an outsider, but when you're in it, it's just how people move and it's how people do things. And by the same token, a bris to a non-Jew seems kind of crazy, you know, but within the Jewish culture and religion, it's like, oh yeah, that's just what we do. And so it was fun for me to try to kind of make parallels between Judaism and Santeria, which are extremely different, but you know, have the same meaning for people within each of the cultures.
Thank you. Yes, that's really powerful, and I think it shows well in the film how, especially in the encounter between Leonardo and Nasim, they each, as you're saying, have their own, I don't want to say fixation, but they're very careful about aspects of life and the way they carry themselves and see their families. And so I feel like it's a beautiful way to show the encounters between these two traditions and religions. I want to ask one last question, maybe for Kaven and Gabriel. Something that was really striking in the film is and powerful is the photography, the images. I feel like there are a lot of moments that are almost experimental, if not abstract, in which, you know, images are, we don't perceive as spectators the images as we would see them, but they're given this kind of poetic overtone. How was that decided, and who's behind it? Is it your cinematographer, or did it have a particular effect in mind?
Well, when you were saying before that you thought it was a sensorial film, that's kind of the best compliment that I could get, because that was definitely what we were trying to do, both in terms of sound and image. And yeah, we really wanted to make a film that wouldn't just, that wasn't, we were never trying to make anything objective. We were trying to make it really feel like what the characters were feeling, and for the actual image and sound to be a character in the film, you know, bouncing off of what the characters were feeling themselves and kind of commenting on what the characters were feeling. And so I worked really closely with the cinematographer, Juan Pablo Ramirez, who's an incredible cinematographer whose career is just shooting through the roof, to design all the images. And we spent a lot of time thinking about how we wanted to approach it. In Cuba, we were really inspired by the work of Alex Webb, who's a Magnum photographer. And for Montreal, it was a lot of Pinkasov, who's another Magnum photographer who's very different. So we definitely had a feeling of what we wanted it to all, feel like, and how to get it. But we were also, there was a lot of improvisation. Like Juan Pablo was a master kind of freestyler, and he'll, like, once we know what the feeling is, he can go and find it, and that's a credit to him. And then in terms of the stuff that's really expressionistic, where it was really kind of in the minds of Leonardo, like for example, when he's thinking back on Cuba, that was shot with a 16mm camera by me, a Bolex from the 1940s. So it has a totally different feeling and texture. And so and those images, they just capture light in a totally different way than a digital medium. So to me, it kind of felt more like an internal feeling, or like a memory. And so it was, for me, it was super fun to just run around with that camera while Juan Pablo had the big fancy camera.
Nice. And I like that you mentioned the music, because it's just such a powerful, I think the way the film starts with the musical accompaniment, it's really just powerful and invigorating in a way. At least it made me wanna continue watch for sure. And then the contrast with ballet music and the character listening to Tchaikovsky, I thought it's just it goes really well with the whole web of cultural influences of the entire film. So that was a beautiful layer to it.
This was what I would like to mention. I think one of the strongest things that was in this film was something that we all in our lives experience. We have conflict, and then we have to do it because we think that the end justifies the means. And we also know that this is not a good way to live. And ultimately, we lose something. Certainly, the dancer and his wife or girlfriend, they knew what they were doing. But at the end, they must have felt very guilty.
Thank you. That's a beautiful way to put it. I like this that you just said, and also something you said earlier, that I feel like it's a really good, pitch for the film. That is this idea that at the end of the film, no one really gets what they wanted, but there's also sort of this overarching idea of destiny that is fulfilling everyone's life and path. So thank you for adding that to the message of the film.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we are at the end of our conversation. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Kaveh and Tisha for interpreting for us. And thank you for a really amazing film. I'm excited for our audience to experience it and that its message continues spreading. And thanks everyone for tuning in today to be here with us. We hope you enjoy more conversations and films throughout this summer edition of the San Francisco Jewish Film Festival. So I hope to see you all very soon and have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.